You're not really seeing it. You're not really seeing it. But it will let the camera. You're the on stage. What's up,
As a writer,
Okay, everyone. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to Litlive. My name is Brent Pencil. I'm a local writer and I'm a member of the Litlive Organizing Committee. I'd like to begin tonight with a land acknowledgement. Is the sound okay? Is it too loud? Is it good? Thumbs up and around? Good.
We lost our focus. I don't know if you can refocus it. This one.
Should autofocus. Is that better? Better? Okay, I can drink too much. The next time I'll adjust the autofocus.
I'd like to begin tonight with a land acknowledgement. Litlive's home is Hamilton, Ontario, on the ancestral lands of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee people, in the territory covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize our responsibilities to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as settlers, neighbors, and caretakers. So again, welcome. We're really excited to be back at the staircase. Thank you to Jason and Rachel and all of the Relay staff for being such gracious and generous partners in this, and especially to Nicole and Elodie, right? Who are watering and feeding us so generously and wonderfully. So thank you to them for hosting us here tonight. This is such a wonderful space. Basically has everything I think we could need. In fact, there's even a change table in the bathroom, so bring your babies next time. I'd like to thank the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council of the Arts for providing funding for Litlive. Public funding for the arts is so important, and we're so thankful for that. I'd also like to thank my fellow members of the Litlive committee, those who are here and those who are here in spirit, who put this event together every month on an entirely volunteer basis. Their efforts are much appreciated. So let's give Litlive a hand. Next, last bit of housekeeping, I'd like to remind everyone of the Litlive Safer Spaces policy. Okay, so Litlive Safer Spaces policy. Litlive strives to be a safe and welcoming space for people of all gender identities, abilities, ages, cultures, and sexualities. With that in mind, discriminatory language or behavior of any kind, in person or online, has no place at this event, and we ask all of you to help us uphold those values tonight. Okay, to the event. We have 6 amazing authors lined up for you tonight, and this is not the order they're presenting, but we have Amanda LeDuc, Nathaniel G. Moore, Robert McGill, Laura Sargent, Andrew Hunter, and Kathy Freeman. And let's just give them all a big round of applause. Welcome our leaders. First up tonight is Laura Sargent, who's an emerging writer who's published creative nonfiction essays and poetry. She won Hamilton's Short Works Prize for Creative Nonfiction in 2021, was a runner-up in 2020, and was a finalist for the Icelandic Writing Retreat in 2018. She was selected for the 2022 Sage Hill Writing Program in Nonfiction and the 2023 Vancouver Manuscript Intensive. In her 20s, she pursued songwriting and was lead guitarist in several indie rock bands and has promised us that she will solo tonight. How could I not, right? Her current work in progress is a book-length memoir about her midlife CrossFit fail. As a pediatric social worker, Laura is well acquainted with the wonder and misery of adolescence. This story that she's going to read tonight was a written runner-up in 2018. Frigid January walks in her Hamilton neighborhood with classic 70s rock blasting from her headphones helped dislodge tonight's story. Laura.
Thanks for having me. On the note of language, there is the use of the word retarded. It's dialogue, which is true to being a teenager in the 1970s, but it wouldn't be used today. This is a life story called Being 14. I'm moth pale, subterranean, insect folded. I spend hours on one grasshopper leg with my classical guitar balanced over the other. I reach for the turntable, drop the speed from 33 1/3 to 16. Now, Mick sounds like Darth Vader. The song becomes fractal, a frozen waterfall. Each note peels slowly. I reach for the tone arm as I crack the song's code. One chord, one riff at a time. Sped up again, and I feel peace, hard strumming, dry, golden wheat stalks at the top of my throat. The kick drum drops, and a lazy snare follows. The syncopation hits my rib cage and cracks me open. Music is unblemished joy. I don't care about classical music anymore. I just want to play rock. I want an electric guitar. I want to catch that rocket ship. Though rock music is outer space for a girl in the 1970s. There's no path, just an underground trail. I sit outside basement windows to hear older boys play, the electric socket thrill of real guitars, hieroglyphics that notate Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin songs are hand-copied jewels. There's Reggie's Music downtown, where I buy a Guitar Player magazine. Any real excitement lies beyond the electric fence of parental permission. Tonight's an exception. I'm going to my first real rock concert with an actual rock band in our gym. I don't care that they're low rent Rush. Their guitar player is wicked. My mom is judge and dad's executioner. He's picking me up at 10:30 p.m. Whether the concert's done or not, that's late enough. Said in unison. I'm for sure the only kid in Dundas with the curfew. Sydenham Hill is a hard black gash that runs from town to sky. A Flintstone simple road, the ascent seems vertical. It swings past a quarry before it narrows and clings to a sheer rock face. From the lookout, it's a football field drop to our high school far below. From above, you'd see us scattered across the snowy parking lot like mottled birdseed. My friends and I shiver under oval pools of mercury light, complexions of vampires, crooked like ravens in black bomber jackets, banging bright feet into the root beer slush, clawing for position. My ears, paired by the wind, fall in curly ribbons to the ground. I haven't worn a winter hat since grade 6. Hats are for babies. We've huddled near a locked gym door. By day, it's the smoker's pit, where puny lumberjacks spend their time in a forest of smoke. Our conversation floats above us in frozen tufts. I'm fucking freezing, Edith yowls. I love it when my friends swear. It's a new skill. Except my parents perch on my shoulder and I can't make the words come out. Oh my God, when are they opening the doors? What? Are you serious? That's retarded. Yeah, Stevenson won't let the band set up. Information's flying by teenage telegraph. Why not? He won't let the band in till the senior boys finish practice. Basketball is wholly at Parkside. Boy dynasties and manes of hair. Stevenson's such a douche. That sounded okay. So are they done practice? Maybe. I think I saw Crookshanks leave. My curfew countdown accelerates while parking lot time is glacial. Triumph's silver equipment truck sits motionless. Nothing's happening. No sign of their road crew. The wind cleaves us from our thin uniforms, flared Levi jeans, turtlenecks, silver crosses, lip gloss. Feathered hair flays our faces. The wind reaches up wide denim cuffs, lashes, broken zippers, pokes holes in crusted mittens. The wind gnaws at our soft bones. Oh my God, this sucks. Let's go somewhere, hey? Edith's flapping her arms in her puffy blue coat. I've nicknamed her Balloon Woman, a nod to the Michelin tire guy. Hey, losers, get in. It's a grade 11 guy, John, driving some big dadmobile. I don't know him, but someone does. He's a friend of Jay or Pi's. Who knows? We pile in, crushed in the back seat, hips wedged against hips. Seatbelts aren't a thing. I check my friends. They're loud and laughing. Is this okay? My thoughts cloud. What are we doing? What about the concert? I glance at my relaxed and unruly friends again. They're okay. It's okay. The night sky breaks to lavender. Snow's falling now. The car's warm. It smells sweet and oaky. A smell I'm slow to recognize. We peel out of the parking lot and turn onto Sydenham Road. The tires spin. John, geez, we giggle. He heads up the escarpment in fishtails. Again, John! One by one, we stop laughing. He's drunk. Holy shit, he's drunk. I'm better at swearing in my head. Everything's mutated. It's like being stuck on a roller coaster. We ratchet up the escarpment, inexorable. I've clamped one hand against the headrest, and the other is dug into the seat. My heart beats in my head. We crest, and the road swings away from the escarpment toward flat farmland. Fields spill snow onto the road. Dudes! John's relaxed. The car surfs amiably through white powder waves. Snow-pasted side windows darken. It's cozy. The wipers squeak and thud, but there's no sky, no horizon, no road. Snowblind, we miss the bend and glide down a side road toward a T-crossing. John jams on the brakes, and the car begins to spin. We do a 180, and the rear slingshots past the front as we slide off the road into a ditch. One side of the car is wedged against a tree. We clamber out and reassemble in a snowbank to shake off the fear, to assess. There's a wrecked car door, but that's it. We're okay. Everybody's okay. My friends pile back in, but I refuse and start walking in the lunar cold along the desolate shoulder. Blinking hard, my eyes fixed like a pony. Self-reproach has boiled up into a familiar sting at the back of my throat. I'm a straight arrow shot past the fence. There's no map home. The car crawls beside me with one door propped open. Sarge, get in. You can't walk back home alone. It's snowing. You'll freeze. Hey, I'll drive slow. I weigh risk with uncalibrated scales and get back in. The car slips, an errant brown button unspooling down a laundered shirt. I'm in the same rear seat, now wedged between my friends and the wrecked door that won't close. John inches downhill, chastened by disapproval. A car full of girls dressed in their mother's angry postures. I'm trying to hold the heavy door closed. Hard as I try, there's a monster-sized crack where the road's snowy teeth snap at my ankles. Whenever my grip sags, the jaws widen. Tumbling road right below my shoe, and a shearing wind that wants to rip me into space. If I can keep pulling, everything everything bad will stay out. Back at the school, we spill out of the car like black confetti, relieved. The school doors are still locked when my curfew timer expires. No concert for me. The faithful orange station wagon sits at the edge of the parking lot. Defeated, I say bye to my friends. My poor dad never knows which version of me he's getting. I smash into my seat. I try to slam the door, but it's enormous. It closes weakly and ruins the drama. Hey, so, how was it? He's keenly interested, enthusiastic, unsuspecting. Like, didn't even get to see him play. It comes out in one blast of self-pity. Then the teenage faucets off. Silence. Stupid curfew. Stupid school. Now I'll never see a band. I can't imagine anything worse. My dad gently steers us home.
Thank you so much for that. In my excitement, I forgot to mention the format of tonight. So we'll have 3 readers, a short 15-minute break where you can refresh your beverages and goodies, and then we'll have the final 3 readers of the evening. Yeah, it's good to be here. Our next reader is coming to us via video. You'll notice that it's kind of a vertical thing. It's not TikTok. We're not that sketchy. Nathaniel G. Moore is presenting by video, and he's a writer and artist who's grateful to be living on the traditional territory of the Wolastoqiyik in New Brunswick. Originally from Toronto, Nathaniel's been publishing books since he was 31 years old. He turns 49 this year. He'll be reading from his latest book, Constrictor, published by Mansfield Press, and would like the audience to be aware that, although no graphic content will be presented in the reading, his book deals with teenage sexual abuse, and the topic does permeate his work. He's pleased once again to be a part of the Litlive universe. So bear with us for a minute while I get the video set up.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. That's Litlive. So I'm going to be reading from Constrictor mostly, and I'll let you know every time I'm reading from a different thing. So this is from Constrictor. I'll just ease into this whole thing. Maybe I'm a mascot, stands barefoot. Kathy Acker watches 10 teenage smarty pants with different feelings, matching outfits. Now get closer to the candelabra. So overdue, she owes them no apology. I would sit in pews close to him. North Green United Church, $1,000 miles and riches collide. Friendship forged over juice and cookies, enthusiastic hands. BMX, bike, frisbee, Pepsi signs, Americana color wheel, keeping me from harm. Granite nightclub, ground beef, a guest of Andrew's family. The burnt fries, I was pretty shy back then. Andrew had no mother when we met, while whispers suggested she fell. She had a brain hemorrhage on the kitchen tile, the blue floor of the kitchen in his house on the Broadway Avenue. It was the blue aqua tiles, the tiles we never had. We had linoleum. We had some sort of roll out the rim to lose. That was what we had. We didn't have what Andrew's family had, the blue tiles on which they found Andrew's mother. A few months before I met him in 1981. Andrew was my friend. Though if you look that way, a friend of mine. He had hair, eyes, teeth, language, memory, and strength. He had a hockey stick, athletic, low, blue eyes, dirty blonde hair, somewhat shaggy. He laughed loudly. He ate Mr. Cup. His dad got me one a few times too. But he shouldn't have spread that rumor that wasn't even true about Corey. It didn't seem to bother me though. No, not for very long. Maybe a lunch hour or two. A few dozen spins of New Order. I was pretty shy back then. I knew I was attracted to girls and love. As the early evening shade began its slow burn, didn't seem to bother me my sense of fate for very long. I was pretty shy back then, and now the way
We tried. We'll make sure we get this up on our YouTube channel eventually when we get all that up and running as well. Okay, our third reader for the evening is Amanda Leduc, who's a Canadian writer and disability rights advocate. She's the author of Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space, which is from Coach House Books in 2020, which was shortlisted for the 2020 Governor General's Award in Nonfiction and longlisted for the 2020, I'm going to not say this correctly, but Barbellion? I said it right. In the UK. She has also published two novels, The Centaur's Wife, published by Random House in 2021, and The Miracles of Ordinary Men, published by ECW Press in 2013. Her newest novel, Wild Life, will publish in spring 2024. Her essays and stories have appeared across Canada, the US, and the UK, and she has spoken across North America on accessibility, inclusion, and disability in storytelling. She has cerebral palsy and lives in Hamilton, Ontario, where she serves as the communications coordinator for the Festival of Literary Diversity, or the FOLD, Canada's first and best festival for diverse authors and stories. And she's also a really cool person. Amanda.
Thank you for that, Brent.
So for those of you who maybe don't know, I write very strange things. And I'm going to read something new, something from my new novel, which is coming out in the spring, hopefully next year. And the basic premise of the novel is there are two hyenas who walk upright and talk like humans, and each chapter of the novel deals with a different person who interacts with the hyenas in some way. And there's a cult that starts because of the hyenas and stuff like that. But in one chapter, the hyenas befriend a woman named Lizzie, who's in an abusive relationship. And they encourage her to get out of the abusive relationship, and she does this by biting her boyfriend on the face. And so her boyfriend, after that incident, runs away to Florida and falls in love with an alligator, as one does. And so this is a little bit of Jackson's story. It's called Jackson and the Alligator. The difference between an alligator and a crocodile, Betty tells him, is why does he even need to ask? Everyone knows crocodiles are not alligators, and that is that. Simple. No, Jackson says, not simple. I've never met a crocodile. I wouldn't know the difference. Would you know me? Betty asks him, point blank. If you were to pick me out of a group in the water. He looks at her full on. In the gold-green light of the sun, she is magnificent, all 10 feet of her spread out iridescent on the rocks. The internet tells him that alligators are black to better camouflage in the water when hunting for prey, but not Betty. Betty is green-blue and green-black and shimmering ripples of osteoderm. She rumbles deep in her chest, and he feels an answering rumble somewhere deep within his pelvis. Lizzie never did that, he thinks. Lizzie never did anything to him like this. When he speaks, his voice is hoarse. I would know you, he says, and he means it. I thought so, she says, smug. Her eyes are gold green and eternal. I would know you too, even if I had to pick you out of 100 other pale, skinny humans. Well, he says, but that's different. Different how? I have hair, he says. Humans have hair in different colors, and our eyes are different colors. It's easier to tell humans apart than it is to tell an alligator from a crocodile. Betty says nothing, only looks at him. I would still know you, he says. He keeps his voice low, the way she likes. All I'm saying is I wouldn't know how to tell an alligator and a crocodile apart if they were anyone else. 65 million years ago, Betty swam with her brethren in waters green and bubbling. 65 million years ago, she was here, eating crayfish and birds that came too close to the water, sinking deep into mud, waiting with her eyes half above and half below the river. 65 million years ago, she decided to survive when the dinosaurs died out. Not her specifically, of course, not his Betty. That would be impossible. Though, when he looks into her eyes, it's not unimaginable to think of her all that long ago, trawling the deeps, waiting for him. How long has she been here? It's hard to say. The sky used to be a different color, she tells him on one of their first nights together. I would come out here and eat and float in the water, watch the stars. Everything was much quieter then. I could sink into the river bottom and let the mud eat my whole day. Her voice is like licorice, unmistakable, unforgettable. What wouldn't he give to speak just like that? But now there is always so much noise. So maybe Betty has been here for a few centuries? No one knows how long alligators live in the wild, 30 to 40 years, but that's mostly because they die in fights over food or territory. There's an alligator in Belgrade who is 82 or 83, no one's quite sure. His name is Munja. He was brought to the zoo in 1937. There is another alligator in Moscow named Saturn who was once, maybe, the personal pet of Hitler. Maybe. Probably not. How long might an alligator live if they were smart, like Betty, and knew what conflicts to avoid? Maybe she's lived longer than both of these beasts. He bet on Betty. He put all his money on her. She tells him about the dinosaurs, which feels like a fib, or at the very least, a slight exaggeration. I am not the largest lizard in the water, Jackson, not by far. When he tries to suggest, gently, always gently, that she couldn't possibly have been in the world at the same time as the dinosaurs, she flicks him with water from her tail and sinks low into the mud, sulking. Have you seen the dinosaurs? She asks him. Were you here when the sky was almost green? No, he most definitely was not. 65 million years ago, she and the crocodile were already distinct, their own habits, their own dreams. The full genome, he reads at night, almost asleep in his motel, suggests that alligators evolved much more slowly than mammals or birds. Well, that isn't surprising. She survived the meteor. Why the need to evolve anymore? She could adapt. She could eat birds, land creatures, humans. Spit out Neanderthal hair and Neanderthal bones. There was no need to become better. She was better already. Is better. His Betty. His Betty of the blue, gray, green scales and timeless lizard eyes. El Lagarto, he thinks. His alligator. His one and only. Some days he floats in the marshes beside Betty and lets her run her claws beneath the water, up and down his back, up and down other parts of him. Sometimes she sings to him. Other times she tells him more about her long days in the marshes, the long years before his arrival. I dreamed of you, she says, and she runs a claw down the center of his stomach, from sternum right to belly button. I dreamed that you would fly here on wings that were blue. The car he has rented is blue and electric. Each night when he returns to the motel, he plugs it in and whispers words of encouragement to help it recharge. Good girl, that's it. You know what to do. And after that, he asks Betty, did you have other dreams about me? I dreamt of the ocean, she says. Her voice runs around and over and through him just like her claws. Beneath the water, he's harder than he's ever been. Even though I did not like it, I dream of the quiet, but nothing else about me. Her eyes are reptilian and calculating, older than anything he's ever known. Once was enough, she says. Once was all that I needed. She can stay underwater for almost 24 hours by shutting off the blood supply to her less important organs. Farther inland, where the river winnows into lakes and ponds, she has dived so deep under the water the light can hardly reach her. She isn't afraid of the dark. The dark is what's kept her alive. Who did you talk to before I came along? No one, she says. Why bother talking to anyone else? What could anyone else have to say? At the motel, he pays extra for laundry service. When he changes the dressing on his cheek, he leaves blood on the towels. In the mornings, he turns on the news and waits to hear more about them, those fucking hyenas. But there is no news for days, at least no news about them, or Lizzie. There is news about the cult, though. There is a chapter down here by the coast that has also, he discovers, begun to talk to alligators, begun to spread word of alligators talking back. They baptized their children in the water with the alligators crouched nearby. A man on the camera shoves his hand into the face of a reporter and flexes his fingers. The webbing, he says. You see, there's webbing. Pretty soon, I'll swim in the water as well as any of them. There's a bruise on his coccyx from where he is supposedly growing a tail. Wild things, the news reporter says, suppressing a smirk. They make your heart sing. No alligators were interviewed for the article, the reporter notes, but maybe next time. The nonchalance makes Jackson so angry that the next morning he looks up the address for the closest cult building to his motel. Then he drives all the way there before breakfast. Betty will be sleeping now, deep within her mud. He has hours to kill. The building is low and nondescript, a pale, boxy hunk of bricks and glass that sits at the edge of a business park. Jackson parks and walks up to the door, then grasps the handle and goes to let himself in. A small woman with long blonde hair, a coiled silver bracelet on her wrist with the emerald green eyes of a snake, opens the door. "Hello," she says. "Can I help you?" "I saw the segment on the news," Jackson says. No sense in small talk. "I wanted to kick that reporter in the face." The woman frowns. "We don't really kick people in the face around here, sir." "Yes," he says, and then he rubs a hand across his eyes. "Sorry, I know the alligators are speaking to you. They're also speaking to me. I guess I just wanted to say that." "Oh?" Her voice and her eyebrows both go up. Which alligators, sir?" "Just one, Betty." "I see." She steps back and lets her arm out. "Why don't you come inside?" Inside, the building is spare and clean. He feels right at home. There are even yoga mats on the floor, each one fanning out so that there's a series of circles on the floor, 8 yoga mats each. He palms the phone in his pocket and takes one deep breath and then another. The woman leads into a small room off the main area, an office. Bookshelves and a slim gray computer on a desk, a basket of pothos crawling down the wall from the window. She takes the chair behind the desk and motions for him to sit, so he does. "Betty," she says then, after a moment. "Yes." He feels the thrum in his pelvis again. "She was waiting for me when I arrived here. I drove along the coast and then something told me to stop and get out. And she was waiting for you," the woman finishes, "just where the river meets the sea." He stops for a moment and looks at her. "Yes. How did you know that?" She sighs. "We know Betty," she tells him then. "Betty's been liking our young men for years." Liking our young men. This means different things, apparently, depending on the man. Some men have floated in the marshes with Betty's for days. Others speak of her and then one day disappear. "We found their cars down the road," the woman says. Her name is Sandy. "Right at the spot where Betty usually waits. The first few times it happens, we hired people to follow her back into the marshes looking for bodies. But all we found were alligators. Other men have courted her for months and months. A couple of years ago, a young boy, 19, the bones of his face still soft and round, not yet hardened into the man he'd become, spent almost a year bringing Betty gifts. Brightly colored birds that he'd trapped in his backyard, rats and mice, and once or twice a ferret that he kidnapped from the pet store where he worked. Betty let him, Sandy says. And then when the year was almost up, she told him that she didn't want to see him anymore and swam away so fast he couldn't follow. He was inconsolable. We had to send him overseas. The stitches on his face are still sore to the touch. When he sees Sandy watching him, he realizes he's been fingering the bandage this whole time. "Do you need to get that looked at?" she says. "It was a goddamn doctor who gave it to me. You think they'd know enough to keep your stitches from getting infected?" Sandy clears her throat. "You might be spending too much time in the marsh," she says. "That might be the culprit." He pretends to ignore this and looks back at the door of the office in the direction of the yoga mats. "So what do you do here then, besides baptize your children in alligator water?" "We are wild," Sandy says simply, and spreads her hands over the desk. "We seek to be one with the wildness of the world." "The wilderness? Like extreme camping?" "No." She cocks her head at him. "We seek to be one with the wild, Jackson. We seek transformation, evolution. We celebrate all that is animal and beautiful about the world. We operate in the belief that everyone and everything on the planet has the capacity to be at once themselves and also 1,000 times more than what they are. We believe that people and animals can become. Become what?" Now she turns her hands palm up and gives him a strange little smile. "Whatever they want to be. Think about it, Jackson. What would you like to become?" Thank you.
One of the things that's we're most proud of, and is a pretty neat thing in general about Litlive, is that it's been running since 1994. So we're approaching our 30th anniversary. It just occurred to me as I was sitting right there. That's pretty neat. One of the other things that we're really proud of is that we pay our writers. So when writers and authors come to present their work, we are able to make sure that they are remunerated properly for their time, which is really great. So to that end, Litlive is a pay-what-you-can event with a suggested admissions fee of $5 to $10. So before we take a break, I'll just point over to the payment table here. We also have books that our authors would be more than happy to sign for sale as well. We also have, of course, time to refresh your food and your beverage from our lovely staff at Relay. Yeah. So I think what time is it? We'll have a 15-minute break. Enjoy beverage, food, books, fellowship, good times, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
I have to be close to the box, so that's why. Yeah. Just have to make sure it's moving. No, it's wonderful. So yeah, being in that process and being very comfortable. So much work, right? Like, yeah, it's a lot of layers to it. So, but it's wonderful to have it all, like, But people over, actually, you'd be like, technology level of like this kind of stuff, right? Like, it's like, okay, here's all this stuff, right?
The white squiggly thing.
Yes. I was like, I was afraid I was at the doctor's office, so.
Man,
Yeah, like, yeah, I don't want to get anywhere near there.
That's right.
Well, it's great. You got Mark here,
Yeah, so the word.
It all requires all of these guys, like, It's like, you know, you brought people something you know to be like,
He's the first half. I didn't even look at the time.
funny when you start
So in that sense, you don't have to worry about sharing this thing. So that's good.
It's great that you credit us as the committee for supporting but really all of our loves should go to the audience. The audience loves it when you love
No, I'm a bunch of my students calling me. So Matthew was in class.
My glasses on, and now I see it, and now I recognize it. I recognize it, they were students, I just couldn't figure out where they were from.
I brought a few with me. Yeah, they have a requirement.
It's actually quite funny. The day after your like class coming in, I had to write a midterm for my aesthetics class, and I ended up using you as an example. Yeah. It was asking, should artists and poets be experts in the field? So they So I chose you, and then I said, Barry the bartender, and which one should write a medical like novel?
Nothing against Barry.
No, and I said Barry might have a great, he might have a great at saying like his experience in an emergency room. Yeah, end up using you because good to see you.
Nice to be appreciated, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
People coming back.
I also really like the
Hold on a second, I have to do it on my phone.
I'm going to send myself an email to my school account. That's the only way I'll remember. And you did send it. But I'm just sending myself an email to my work account, and that will remind me when I'm on admin duty today.
That's what audience.
I wouldn't have picked Yeah,
It's got
it's
the,
so different than all that.
I know, it's got the gold tooth. It's got the leather ribbons and everything. It's quite different than the one that they have on the internet from
The James, yeah, Richard. Okay. Well, that's really interesting because I had a totally different.
I actually have them with a different, I have a different, when I had a different idea of them as well.
Oh, you had a drawing.
Yeah, like it's written like a horse. And
Which side is
and then,
which?
and then I went back to it and I said, oh, when I was actually looking at it on Monday, I sent it to you. I pulled out my phone and said, oh, that's not how I remember it. So that was, sorry, what's your name?
Getting back to my duty. I have a book coming out, and you can finally do events together.
They like where's this thing?
I'm not sure if that's exactly 15 minutes, but I'm going to get back to it. Okay, kicking off part 2 of tonight's Litlive event is Andrew Hunter. Andrew is a writer, freelance curator, artist, and educator based in Hamilton. He's held curatorial positions across Canada and was previously the Frederick S. E. Curator of Canadian Art at the Art Gallery in Ontario, where he produced major exhibitions and publications, including Every Now and Then, Reframing Nationhood, In the Ward, Lauren Harris, and Coville. Hunter taught at the Ontario College of Art and Design University and the University of Waterloo, and has lectured internationally on curatorial practice. He's a member of the advisory board for the Institute of the Study of Canadian Slavery at NSCAD. What does that stand for? Thank you. And we're really happy to have you, Andrew.
Having Dave behind me makes me nervous. I'll just say that. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to get to read from a book that is about this place. In this place. I don't mean this place, the staircase. It's not about the staircase. I haven't finished that yet. So I'm going to read. Is this too loud? I talk loud. Okay. I like to read a different author than me to begin, because I'm inspired by the work of a number of other authors. So, but the book I'm going to read from is called It Was Dark There All the Time, Sophia Birth and the Legacy of Slavery in Canada, published by Goose Lane. It came out a year ago. And just to give you a quick background, the book is based on the life of Sophia Birth and Pooley, who was enslaved in Canada for over 3 decades. And the interview that was done with her and published in 1856 is the only known first-person account of a person enslaved in Canada, which doesn't mean there weren't very many. There were many enslaved people here. So I'm going to start with a quote. I am hugely inspired by James Baldwin. He's influenced my work for a very long time. And one of the reasons I often quote James Baldwin is in a lot of his writings and interviews and talks, he directly challenges whiteness to take accountability for the history of colonialism, racism, and certainly for the history of chattel slavery. So the quote, which is at the beginning of my book, is, "History is not the past. History is the present. We carry our history with us. To think otherwise is criminal." I also want a quick quote, because sometimes people criticize me for doing the work that I do, particularly around people of blackness. And I want to quote Dr. Charmaine Nelson, who's the head of the Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery, now Slavery North. And she often reminds people that the history of slavery is not Black history, it is all of our history. Okay? I'm going to read a little bit from this brand new book by Nell Irvin Painter, with permission from Nell. Her last book, The History of White People, is brilliant, and I think it's on the shelves. Dave Shaw. Dave ordered this for me, it just came out. And the title of the book is Sojourner Truth, A Life, a Symbol. And that's Sojourner Truth for those who don't know. We're probably one of the, next to Frederick Douglass, alongside Frederick Douglass, one of the most important abolitionists in the United States. And I'm reading from this because she does a wonderful job kind of setting the scene about slavery in the North and how it's not remembered. And it's deeply relevant to the book I write because the woman I'm writing about was born into slavery in New York State, quite close to where Sojourner Truth was born in the Hudson Valley. And so when I read this, she's talking about New York, New England, but in your head, think Canada, because almost all of the United Empire Loyalists who came into this part of the world came from the areas she's talking about. And many of the United Empire Loyalists who came here brought enslaved people with them, okay? So, sorry, I have to have a stick so I don't fall down. Okay, so Isabella is Sojourner Truth. That was her name as a child, okay? Isabella's birth coincided with a climatic invention, the cotton gin, which made slave-grown, short-staple cotton the economic underpinning of the American South. During the antebellum era of cotton as king, the economic and political interests of elite Southerners increasingly diverged from those of elite Northerners. This polarization was as yet embryonic in the late 1790s, which is just 10 years into Sophia Berthen's life. Because the political tensions that finally led to civil war had not yet acquired the agonizing sharpness that would dominate the middle of the century and bring Sojourner Truth into the public eye. When Isabella was born, the American North, as well as the American South and Canada, was a land of bondage. The effacement of the memory of Northern slavery has skewed American and Canadian regional identities by exonerating white Northerners and blaming white Southerners. This erasure complicates the task of situating Isabella's life history. For by the mid-19th century, when Sojourner Truth was a familiar presence in anti-slavery circles, New York belonged to the metaphorical land of liberty, with Southern slavery as the symbol of American slavery. Truth's early life automatically migrated into a vague, composite antebellum South, a Southern nowhere that, for all its lack of specificity, is definitely south of the Mason-Dixon line. Though foreign to Northerners, the metaphorical slave South was at the same time familiar by dint of having so often been described. In this South, slavery was everlasting. Slaves could not marry, own property, or learn to read or write. Their masters' powers were absolute, with a corruption that accompanies absolute power. Sex and violence suffused the entire institution. This slave South was a purgatory from which only the strongest, bravest, and most intelligent of enslaved people would flee. Men and women like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. Even these exceptional figures came from Maryland, right next door to the North. The Deep South was a hell that allowed no escape. In the faraway states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, unspeakable atrocities seemed to occur on a routine basis. Nothing was too awful to happen there. Such a facile symbolic opposition, slave South and free North, but realities in Isabella's time and Sophia Berthen Pooley's time were not so neat. So I'm going to read for about 10 minutes. Is that okay? Yeah, I hope so. Just tell me to stop. From my book, and it's a bit further on into the story. So I'm just going to jump right in. Okay? And I begin in Dundas. It is early when I leave my home, heading down my former home, down Tweedsmuir Avenue in the dark, thinking of Sophia's presence here, in this place of ignorance. Tweedsmuir is the name of a Scottish village. Tweed, or Tweddle, is a family name, and muir means moorland, so Tweed's moorland. That village is situated on the River Tweed, about 80 kilometers south of Glasgow. In the early 19th century, the region became a favorite haunt of British elite who built estates and played at being Highland gentry, with their invented tartans made of tweel, a traditional woolen fabric, now called tweed, thanks to one London merchant's error in labeling. These estates were the model for Sir Allan MacNab's Dundurn Castle and Peter Carroll's Rock Bay Castle in Hamilton. According to the website for a company selling clan tartans, tweed had, quote, humble beginnings as a practical peasant fabric, end quote, and became, quote, a symbol of wealth by landowners and royalty, end quote. It was popularized by designers in the 20th century and most recently has been adopted, quote, by hipsters and millennials, which still harks back to tweed's heritage as a signifier of both wealth and vintage authenticity, end quote. Anybody wearing plaid tartan this evening? Dave. All of these inventions of heritage and adopted signifiers of labor live on in Hamilton, as does the continuing amnesia of the deeper hidden truths. I turn left onto South Street and follow the sidewalk that ends where Old Ancaster Road meets Ogilvy Street, the newer route down the hill. It takes me about 5 minutes to reach this spot. I walk down what's left of Old Ancaster Road and soon come to a dead end. A paved walkway continues on to Spencer Creek, fast running behind a Tim Hortons. At the main intersection, 4 streets meet, watched over by the old town hall. I proceed west, passing the fragile stone mill building that lingers at the end of Hat Street. This was the center of the Hats town. I've walked this road hundreds of times. I wonder how many times Sophia passed this way. So, little note to add, Sophia Berthen was owned by Samuel and Margaret Hatt for about 7 or 8 years. So Hat Street, the town, directly connected with chattel slavery. I crossed the creek a second time proceeding west and stop at a plaque for Dundas Mills at the corner, which reads, quote, by 1799, the Morton family had a sawmill near this site on Spencer Creek. They sold this property in 1800 to Edward Peer, who built a grist mill. Peer sold the property in 1804 to Richard and Samuel Hatt and a partner, but by 1807, Richard had become sole owner. We could add, quote, and then Samuel purchased Sophia Berthen for $100. Dundas was first known as Coote's Paradise. It became Dundas Mills and was officially named Dundas in 1814. The town was named after Dundas Street, that still runs west from the heart of what was York and is now Toronto, which was itself named in honor of a powerful friend of John Graves Simcoe. Henry Dundas, 1st Viscount Melville, an Edinburgh lawyer and politician who never visited North America and never would. Henry Dundas was many things. He was a leading Tory, Secretary of State for War, and the last politician to be impeached in Britain. He was popularly known as King Harry IX the great tyrant and the uncrowned King of Scotland, due to his seemingly unbridled control of the country. Melville Street, named for a peerage title of Henry Dundas, is lined with the grand Victorian mansions of Dundas's wealthiest citizens, which seems fitting as he was one of the wealthiest citizens in Edinburgh. Lisa Williams, director of the Edinburgh Caribbean Association, makes clear the derivation and effects of that fortune in her discussion of his hometown statue. This is a quote from her. In the heart of the new town, Edinburgh, the statue of Henry Dundas towers over St. Andrew's Square. As you gaze around this prestigious square, your eyes will fall on several buildings that would have been homes or business premises of Scots who made their fortunes in the transatlantic slave trade. It is fitting, perhaps, that this is where we find Dundas. With the immense power he held, he was able to use his influence to delay the abolition of the slave trade a further 15 years to 1807 and the subsequent abolition of British slavery in 1834. Who knows how much more suffering was inflicted on African people in the Middle Passage during those 15 years. In 1795 to 1797, Melville's nephew, John Hope, was a general with the British forces in the French and Spanish West Indies. He was second in command during the suppression of Hedon's rebellion in Grenada, which had been inspired by the revolt of the enslaved in San Domingo, or Haiti, as we know it, that Simcoe fought to suppress. Under Melville's ultimate leadership as Secretary for War, enslaved peoples were rising up throughout the region. There were revolts in Jamaica, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Curaçao, Venezuela, Barbados, Guyana, the French then the British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Brazil. In North America, there were over 250 uprisings during the 17th to 19th centuries. If I had turned left back at the old Ancaster Road and followed it south, I would have come to Old Dundas Road, passing the site of the Hat's first mill, eventually reaching Ancaster, where another plaque promotes the usual suspects, local founders, Wilson, Beasley, Russo, the Hats. The observation made by Janea Khan of Black Lives Matter's Toronto concerning William and Samuel Jarvis comes to mind. We hear these neat stories of heroic initiatives of white men, but we don't get to hear the whole story, end quote. Sophia's story publicly troubles the local founders' legacies here. Sadly, some of the few notable changes in the names on public facades around Hamilton have done more to erase than to enhance. George R. Allen School, no relation to my grandfather Herbert Allen, is now called Cootes Paradise Elementary School. While people may associate this name with natural areas nearby, they have actually enhanced the name of a colonial British officer who took great pleasure in gunning for game in his paradise. Sophia hunted here many times. A better name would have been Sophia Berthen Elementary School. The school sits in the center of Westdale, a 1920s neighborhood whose original developers explicitly limited homeownership to white Protestants. Thanks to the real estate boom in Hamilton, obscure names of old neighborhoods are being resuscitated as marketing brands, particularly in areas that were historically home to working people and the working poor, new Canadians and marginalized communities at risk. These names erase histories, like the gentrification of tweed that shifts a commoner's durable garment into a fashion signifier of authenticity for the landed gentry. Gentry, by the way, is at the root of gentrification. One of the most egregious branding exercises has been the promotion of the Beasley name, all too prominent on neighborhood signage, a city park, and a community center. On Ferguson Avenue, a series of brightly colored banners carry the embellished words, "Be long, be kind, and be fair," with the slogan, "Welcome to the Beasley neighborhood, a place where you can be your best." I often encounter designers digging in the local archives for inspiration to support their heritage branding schemes. Unfortunately, a complete picture has not been archived. A figure like Richard Beasley will be remembered as a hardworking first settler, confirming nostalgic ideas of early Canada, such as fur trading, clearing land, and living rough and rugged. Until recently, the Beasley neighborhood was one of the poorest in Canada. It is now marketed as, quote, hip, trendy, and very desirable, an area of vintage authenticity. Beasley is buried behind the Anglican Cathedral on James Street North. The statement on his tombstone claims he was, quote, the first settler at the head of the lake, end quote, which is what this area was known as. It is repeated in many publications, as well as on a newer Beasley family marker in Woodland Cemetery. Beasley likely didn't arrive at the head of the lake until later. He first moved to Quebec from Albany in 1777, and he was long associated with shady land deals and the holding of enslaved or indentured people. Quote, Beasley's dealings have been well documented in the annals of Hamilton's history, end quote. And this is Adrian Shadd, who's a brilliant historian. Quote, Adrian again, however, the fact that he and his family of 9 children owned slaves is not usually mentioned, end quote. Shadd refers to stories published in Hamilton newspapers concerning 2 enslaved men, Jackson and Wilson, who were owned by the Beasley family. Quote, according to Beasley family lore, when Britain abolished slavery, the Beasleys slaves were generously provided for and given a start in life. Free in 1834, both men chose to remain in the service of the Beasleys, leaving one to wonder what real opportunities there truly were for 2 black men here. Another Hamilton family whose name continues to define an affluent neighborhood in the city are the Durans. Coming from Abergavenny, Wales, they acquired 40 hectares at the head of the lake in 1804 and also held enslaved people, as revealed in the following quote. Charles Durand, the son of James Durand, told the story that one day his father and his father's wife and their baby were descending the mountain when tragedy struck. The baby was in the care of an enslaved woman on horseback. There was an accident and Mrs. Durand was thrown out of the vehicle onto the rocks, dying not long after. The enslaved woman, whose name has been lost to history, became nurse to the children of James Durand's second marriage. Durand built mills and invested in local industry and infrastructure and served in the Parliament of Upper Canada. His name has not been lost to history. Honoring the Durand name is specific to Hamilton, while Tweedsmuir can be found on signage across the country. While the name does point back to a Scottish village, it actually refers to John Buchan, first Baron Tweedsmuir, and Susan Charlotte Buchan, Baroness Tweedsmuir, who were respectively the Governor-General and Vice-Regal Consort of Canada from 1935 to 1940. Before becoming Governor-General, John Buchan was a Free Church minister and a member of Parliament. Both were writers, Susan of children's books, John of fiction for adults, including The 39 Steps, published in 1915. Immediately after graduating from Oxford in 1901, he became private secretary to Alfred Milner, the High Commissioner for South Africa, Governor of Cape Colony, and colonial administrator of Transvaal and the Orange Free State. Like Canada, South Africa began to thrive in the latter part of the 19th century, at the same time that race-based policies became more rigid in both countries. Cape legislation that discriminated specifically against Black Africans and which would inform the apartheid system in place from 49 to 93 began appearing shortly before 1900, building on white supremacist policies initiated by the Dutch East India Company. To seriously address the legacy of apartheid, South Africa initiated a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1995, which has been described as, quote, the gold standard for how a divided society with a violent past might work through the past and move forward, end quote. The lesson from South Africa is that, quote, working through a complicated past takes time and is still taking time. Decades later, Canada launched its own Truth and Reconciliation Commission focused on the legacies of residential schools and anti-Indigenous racism. Many Indigenous peoples voiced their disappointment that Canadians were rushing to reconciliation while avoiding the truth. Canadians, as the cliche goes, like to say sorry. But as an automatic response, an apology can lack sincerity and is more to the benefit of the apologizer, not those harmed by their actions, leading to the kinds of expectations of gratitude that James Baldwin observed. Whiteness wants to keep moving forward, to stay in command, and to set the terms and the timeline of reconciliation, while using time to delay and avoid real reparations. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to all our authors and readers tonight. That's really why we're here. Robert McGill is the author of 3 novels, The Mysteries, Once We Had a Country, and most recently, A Suitable Companion for the End of Your Life. He has also published 2 nonfiction books, The Treacherous Imagination and War is Here, The Vietnam War in Canadian Literature. His short fiction has appeared in magazines including The Atlantic, The Dublin Review, Fiddlehead, Rain, Hazlitt, and Prairie Fire. Robert teaches creative writing at the University of Toronto, and he's a resident of Dundas. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks to Litlive for inviting me to be here again. I read from Once We Had a Country in this space a few years ago, and it's really wonderful to be returning to it and to be here with you. Let me tell you a bit about A Suitable Companion for the End of Your Life. This is a novel about a young woman named Regan. Regan is going through a difficult time. It is so difficult that she takes rather drastic action. She places an order on the internet. And what comes the next day on her doorstep is a box. And inside that box is the flattened, rolled up, and still living body of a human being. And this is not to Regan's surprise. It turns out that this person's name is Ula. What does surprise Regan is the way in which she becomes quite invested in Ula's well-being and in her own, in fact, as both of their lives become under rather dire threat. And so the novel follows them as they're in this urgent situation. I'm going to actually read from the middle of the novel, and this is a scene where Regan is meeting up with her father. And until this point in the novel, Regan has been at home in her family's house with Ula and nobody else, because her mother, Regan's mother, is off across the world at a job. Her father, Regan's father, has been in a treatment center. He's been in a treatment center for a few weeks due to an issue with drug use. So we're going to meet up with Regan and her father after he has called her. He has called her because he has walked out of this treatment center, and he has ended up down at the waterfront of the city. It's a city that's a version of Toronto. He's down near the Sunnyside Pool, for those of you who know the Toronto waterfront. And he's called her, asking her to come and pick him up. But although she feels obliged to go down and see him and get him to a safe space, back to the treatment center, in fact, she does not want to bring him back home because of this urgent situation with Ula. So I'm going to read to you as they're meeting up with one another, Regan and her father. She has just shown up. She's also just found out that he's high. He's not admitted it, but she's pretty clear that he's high, and he's on a very particular drug that he's had experience with before with bad consequences. So here we go, Regan and her father. Her father's pupils had swallowed his irises. "Come on, the cab's waiting," Regan said. "I don't trust that guy," he replied. "What, the cabbie? You haven't even met him." "He's a cheat," he said. "He plans to charge you double. I mean, his father beat him and he's got 5 kids, but..." She couldn't believe it. He wasn't on just any old kind of high. "You got horseshoes, didn't you?" she said. "After all that time in treatment?" Come on, you know I wouldn't do that, he replied, but he averted his eyes. How had he managed it? At the center, he wasn't supposed to have money. Maybe he'd come here because one of his turnpike musician friends lived nearby. You really didn't get horseshoed, she said. Let's see your back then. When she reached to yank at his sweatshirt, he jerked away. I know you're angry, he began. Dad, that crap doesn't actually let you read minds. We go through this every time. It didn't matter what she said, though. She wouldn't change his mind while he was on the stuff. Let's just get you to the center, she said. You can snoop into everybody's thoughts there. He shook his head. I'm not going back, he said. Why not, she said. I don't want to talk about it. He grimaced and reached to scratch at his back. What's the matter, she said. Looking caught out, he dropped his arm to his side. Dad, it could be infected, let me see. He rucked up his sweatshirt and turned around. The horseshoes were up near his shoulders. At least he always got them where nobody could see them. Each time a new one was applied, though, he acted proud. If he didn't watch it, he was going to turn into one of those horseshoe addicts who ended up in jail for stalking strangers, trying to eavesdrop on their thoughts, hoping to pirate their banking passwords. Or he'd gamble away her college fund playing poker, always baffled when the other guys turned out not to have the cards he thought they did. On his back were almost a dozen horseshoes, each the size and color of a plum. They'd been laid out crookedly, some sideways, some upside down, like stamps in a passport. Regan didn't take long finding the latest one. The skin on which it had been branded was raised and bleeding at the edges. How does it look, he asked. Bleeding a little. That's okay, it always does that. Such a dumb drug, she said. Why can't you just smoke it? When she said that, he tensed up. What is it, she said. I was thinking, he replied. Other people can get some of the effect from touching it. Yeah, you told me before. She drew away a little. Why don't you do it, he said. Dad, we've been through this. Whenever he was strung out, he turned evangelical for the stuff. You could read my thoughts, he said. It might be good for you to see what's going on in your old dad's brain. The idea made her skin crawl. I mean, it's all nice stuff in there, he said. The stuff about you, anyway. If there's something you want to tell me, she said, just say it. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped himself. Some things are hard to put into words, he said. If you could see what's going on with me. I'm not getting anywhere near your horseshoe, she said. The last thing she needed was to be stoned and thinking she could read people's minds. The hit would only last a couple seconds, he insisted. Dad, she said, why are you always trying to talk your child into taking drugs? He gave a chuckle like what she'd said wasn't an exact description of reality. In a second, she'd be yelling at him, and where had yelling ever got her? In these situations, she knew what worked. She needed to give in, humor him, then use her surrender as leverage. Okay, she said, you win. I'll touch the horseshoe. He broke into a smile, looking so happy that it pained her. But only if you make a promise, she added. After, you'll go back to the center. His expression soured. Do we have a deal, she said? He gave his head a shake, like he was clearing an Etch-a-Sketch. That's my impression of giving your head a shake, like you're clearing an Etch-a-Sketch. Then his expression turned upbeat again. Sure, he said, deal. He agreed way too easily, but what could she do? Come here then, she said. Once more, he hiked up his sweatshirt. The new horseshoe looked spongy with blood. She thought of dirty needles, hepatitis. She pictured making a fool of herself at the first stranger who came along, telling them she could see their pedo fantasies. Maybe the horseshoe wouldn't have an effect on her, though. Lots of things didn't work. Spicy food never made her sweat. The hypnotism her therapist had tried on her never took. I just put my hand on it, she said. Your fingers, he replied. 5 seconds should do the trick. He got down on one knee with his back to her. She placed her fingers on the horseshoe and felt the wetness of his blood. Then she whipped her hand away and wiped it on the grass. She was waiting to see if there'd be a drib of good feeling when she felt the kick. It struck her in the back of the neck and fireworked through her, a charge of elation, a hot fizz. She scrunched her eyes to take it in. When she opened them, she was flat on her back, staring at clouds. You're okay, said her father. Take deep breaths. Go with it. The fizz had started to crest when she went rushing into him. Though she still lay on the ground, she had the sensation of their bodies smashing together like the circles from 2 spotlights blending on a wall. Next thing she knew, she was looking out from his eyes, down at herself. She saw other faces overlaying hers, her mother's, her grandparents, younger than she'd ever known them. She heard a few bars of a guitar solo, an old-timey tune she didn't recognize, but played in his style, all capoed, cross-picking, hitting the strings hard. Then the music slid beneath his cramp of worry. Words that weren't words arrived in swirls of mood and memory. What happened to my little girl? No more running races, hardly any muscle. She used to be so fast. How many times did I tell her calories in need to equal calories out? Didn't I say, listen to your body? From somewhere outside his head came his other voice. Is it working? Can you see my thoughts? It's too much, she whispered. Hang on, he said, it won't last. His brain kept up its tumble. Parched throat, need a drink, people are always leaving. But her mother's asleep, doesn't matter to her what happens here. Regan needed it to stop. A rill of static trickled down the middle of his thoughts. Slowly, their lodgment in her loosened. And then, all at once, he was sluiced away, dragged out until he was so far gone that he became a separate person standing over her. She propped herself up on her elbows and he asked if she was okay. It's incredible, right? He said. You saw my thoughts? She nodded, telling herself it hadn't been real. What did you see? He asked. I don't want to talk about it. He looked offended. Why not? If you want to know, she said, read my mind. His shoulders slumped. The horseshoes worn off for me, he said. You took so long getting here. It's not my fault, she said, if your drug use isn't working out. Slowly, she regained her feet. Come on, let's get you to the center. Thank you very much.
Our final reader of the evening is Kathy Friedman, who's the author of the short story collection All the Shining People, published by Nancy in 2022. She studied creative writing at UBC and the University of Guelph and was a finalist for the Writers' Trust Bronwyn Wallace Award for Emerging Writers. Her writing has appeared in Grain, Geist, Prism International, Canadian Notes and Queries, and the New Quarterly, as well as other publications. She teaches in Humber College's Bachelor of Creative and Professional Writing program, and is also the co-founder and artistic director of Inkwell Workshops, which offers free creative workshops for people with mental health and addiction issues. Kathy is currently working on a collection of essays about travel, music, and mental health. She lives in Toronto. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me from Toronto, and thanks to all the other readers who are fantastic. Thanks to all of you for listening. I spent quite a bit of time hovering over Hamilton in realtor.ca. I just turned 40, so it's like my Pornhub. Obviously Toronto real estate, Toronto realtor.ca is torture porn, so we don't go there. We look at Hamilton. So
Maybe one day it'll happen. Anyways, I'm going to read from my collection, All the Shining People. I'm going to read a story called Henty's Voice. Let me just get the page. Yeah, the year is like 94, 95, it's the mid-90s, and Henty or Henrietta has just moved from a farm in South Africa to Kitchener, Ontario. She's having a pretty rough time of things. And yeah, I'm trying to think what else I can say about it. I do have a bit of a content warning for some fat phobia and ableism. Like I said, she's having a rough time. And yeah, anyways, this is Henty's voice. Next to your wedding, you thought your bat mitzvah would be the happiest day of your life. Sitting in shul, you daydream about looking grown up in an elegant dress and being allowed to wear real perfume, and how all the eyes in the packed sanctuary would be on you. In reality, since you belonged to your new shul in Kitchener for such a short time, they would only give you a Friday night service, which meant the place would be almost empty, apart from your family's guests. And you hate your dress even more than you hate your mother for bringing you to Canada. In bed the night before your bat mitzvah, everything feels hectic. You haven't asked anyone from school to come. It pains you that your Canadian cousins will know you haven't made a single friend yet. You think back to last summer when you stayed with them, newly arrived in this country. Practically every day you sat on the back veranda with Tamar. You were both trying to lighten your hair by rinsing it with lemon juice and letting it dry in the sun. Cooling your feet in a waiting pool, you peppered her magic 8-ball with questions. Does Tamar's crush like her back? Very doubtful. Will I become a famous actress one day? Reply hazy, try again. You don't even need lemon juice, Tamar had said, fingering your blonde strands. David had been jealous of you for other reasons. He'd asked you what South Africa was like so many times you'd started making up stories. For a while you had him going that lions roamed the streets of Kimberley and purred like kittens if you gave them a bowl of milk. He was only a year younger than you, but he was sort of slow, and he seemed to believe that Africa held all the world's magic. You didn't tell him the thing you weren't supposed to know, the thing you overheard Pa tell Mom, how the gardener's teenage son was arrested in Haleshaway. Whatever they did to him in detention was so horrible he went mad, and now he can't be left alone, ever. You weren't the only one pretending about South Africa. At supper, your mom and Auntie Sophie reminisced about their childhoods, the trees they had climbed, the monkeys they encountered, Mom's face pink with pleasure, even though she always complained that her sister looked down on your family, as if you were peasants. Uncle Nathan and Tamar joined in, everyone except Pa, whose English was rough, and David, who was so little and his family left Joburg, he barely remembered a thing. You slept on a spare mattress on the floor of Tamar's room, and every night you had long, serious talks. You were macaque about saying goodbye to everyone you knew, thanks to your mom's paranoia. She didn't trust the new government, and she convinced Pa they were going to take away the farm. Tamar understood how you felt. This whole year, you haven't talked on the phone with her or anything, but you can't wait for her to arrive. She's the weekend's only bright spot. You aren't sure yet if you're going to explain your situation. The girls at school call you Fat Panties Henty. At first, led by Jamie Green, they'd surround you at recess, demanding you say things in your cute accent and tickling you, as though you were a pet or a small child. Sometimes the coolest guy in your class, Fred Wiggler, would follow you and Naomi Fisher as you walked home from school and ask you to say something about the comments. You'd ignore him. One day, you went into the girls' bathroom during lunchtime and Jamie was standing there with her arms folded under her boobs. You think she must stuff her training bra to make them look so round, like ping pong balls. She came up to you at the sink and turned off the tap while you were washing your hands. So, Henty, I hear you like my boyfriend. Her lips were shiny, smeared with chapstick. You could smell tuna fish on her breath. Who told you that? If you go near Brent again, I swear I haven't gone near him. Yeah, right. I don't know who's been talking rubbish about me, but Brent told me so himself. And Naomi swore on her life it was the truth. It was like you'd been bitten by a snake.
venom making your body feel strange and stiff. Jamie and her friends were mean to Naomi because her parents were first cousins. Their jokes reminded you of things the English said about the Afrikaners, and since you're both, your father's Afrikaans, your mother Jewish, you never joined in. Did she tell you that your boyfriend's face makes me want to vomit? As one of the few Jewish girls in Kimberley, you'd learn not to back down from bullies. You're such a bitch, Jamie hissed. After that, Naomi began walking to and from school with Jamie and her pals. They stopped talking to you at recess, and though they still made fun of Naomi's parents, she started laughing along as though she were in on the joke. You consider telling this version of the story to tomorrow. Wide awake, again. You can't stop your thoughts from zipping around your brain like spaceships in a computer game. Trying to stop them, you put your hand between your legs for the third time that day. You feel nauseated, sick of doing this to yourself, and out of control for not being able to stop. Your shame is like snow inside a globe. You can shake it off briefly, but soon it settles on everything again. You steal out of bed and head downstairs. You know the house well enough by now to avoid the creaky step. Someday, maybe, it will start to feel like home. In the kitchen, you get out a box of finger biscuits, left over from your mom's tiramisu, and sit at the table eating in the dark. You finish the whole box. Then you go upstairs and brush your teeth. Your gums start bleeding, but you keep brushing, edging your toothbrush down your throat, toying with the idea of making yourself kosh. It isn't the first time you've snuck downstairs and stuffed your face, and it shows in your body, which is accelerating through puberty, as though it knows something the other girls' bodies don't. TV or SB, they ask each other, unlike the boys, who just snap the bands under the girls' shirts to find out who wears training bras and who wears sports bras. You're the only girl with real underwear bras, which your mother buys for you at Sears. Along with the trail pairs the other girls have spotted below your belly button when you were changing for gym class, your bras confirm what they already think. Your hunger for sex is insatiable. Before you go back to bed that night, you force yourself to look in the mirror. Fat panties, you would mouth to your reflection, slut. Your mom wakes you early the next morning. She's made sketches of the updo she wants for you, held in place with a rhinestone lip that matches your bat mitzvah present, a sterling silver necklace. You want to leave your hair loose over your shoulders and wear silver hoops in your ears, but she thinks hoop earrings make girls your age look cheap, and she says you have a long neck, like a swan, so an updo will be slimming. The salon she's chosen is strange. Everything, the swivel chairs, the hair dryers, even the sinks on the back are neon pink, as though the place is owned by Barbie. Your stylist is a girl named Jen, who chews gum and wears a ripped-up bodysuit held together by little safety pins. She asks your name 3 times and tells you you have to spell it for her. Then your mom shows Jen the drawings she's made, and Jen paws at your hair while mom nods and says, "Yes, exactly, that's exactly right." Jen and your mom move on to discussing your fringe. You want it to be wispy, like Kelly's fringe on Beverly Hills 90210, but your mom is running the show. Soon you're being hustled off to get your hair washed, and no one has even asked what you think. Pa is back from work when you get home. He doesn't understand why bat mitzvahs have to cost so much, but he meets you at the door, takes your hand, and kisses it. "Who is this beautiful young woman?" he asks. As though you're so pretty, he doesn't recognize you anymore. Pa is your friend, your only ally against mom, but what she says goes. And anyway, it's not like you can really talk to him. If only your best friend were here. Pamela Prinsloo had a round, innocent face that all your teachers loved, in spite of her cheeky tongue, and her mother didn't mind that you went to shul instead of church. When you told Pamela you were leaving Kimberley, she promised to write you a letter every week. For a few months, she kept her word. But she stopped writing because, after her first letter, you never responded. Every time you sat down to do it, you felt a tightness in your chest that reminded you of when your mom accused you of not confiding in her, of not loving her. You would put down your pen and go to the refrigerator instead. Maybe tomorrow will be your new best friend. You'd remembered her as a bossy older girl who taught you to make mud pies the one time you visited Joburg. The next time you saw her at her house in Thornhill, she was a teenager wearing a Van Halen top and glasses smudged with fingerprints. You wondered what Pamela Prinsley would think of her, whether she'd be impressed by the way Tamar talked like an American, or disdainful of those dirty glasses. Or both, maybe, like the way you felt. When Tamar took you to her room to get settled in, she said, "We don't really know each other, do we? It's funny how they make a big deal of us all being one family when we're basically strangers." It was true, and yet, with Tamar, you quickly became a magician, reaching deep inside yourself to pull out a long string of scarves. Every time you told a story, another, and then another one followed. At the end of your visit, when your house in Kitchener was finally ready, she gave you her denim jacket. It's still a bit too big, but you've been wearing it anyway. You aren't sure yet what you're going to tell her about your situation at school, not just the conversation with Jamie Green in the washroom, but everything that happened afterwards. The day Jamie confronted you, Miss Burke announced that auditions for the school play, Anne of Green Gables, would be taking place the following week. Caught up in fantasies about the play, you didn't mind walking home alone. Then, just before the bridge over Schneider Creek, you heard a whistle and turned to see Brenda Winkler following you. "I guess you think you're too good to walk with me, eh? You have a girlfriend." He caught up to you, leaned forward, and said in a low voice, "Jamie doesn't know everything." You laughed, not knowing what to say. "Close your eyes," he said. "I want to tell you a secret." Your heart fluttered, soft as moth wings, and you closed your eyes. You felt him moving towards you, and you braced yourself for the feel of his lips, but something wet hit your cheek instead. "Keep them closed. I don't want you to get sick from looking at me." "What?" You opened your eyes and wiped your face. He'd spat on you. "Ugly bitch," he said with eyes narrowed into heartless slits. You immediately knew he was right. At home, you went straight to the fridge and stuffed yourself so full you couldn't move. Your mom screamed at you for leaving a mess in the kitchen. Jamie got the part band in the school play. You didn't even audition. You think back to the summer before, when Tamar had confessed a gigantic secret. She thought sometimes about kissing girls. You were both lying in bed, and her teeth shone in the dark as she giggled, or maybe cried, you couldn't tell. Now you want to tell her your secret so she can keep it safe, the same way you've been guarding hers, as stoically as a penguin guarding an egg between its feet. Your uncle and aunt arrive right before lunchtime. "Mazel tov, Katie," Auntie Sophie says, kissing your cheek. Uncle Nathan gives you a card with a check inside. David shakes your hand formally, and Tamar hugs you, then tells her mother she's hungry. Maybe she's in a mood, you think, or forgot about the time she called you the little sister she'd always wanted. So you ask if she wants to see your dress. Later, she says, "I'm starving." You turn on your heel, hoping she doesn't see your eyes welling up with tears like a baby. After lunch, you ask Tamar if she wants to talk. You take her up to your room. "So, I'm not sure how many of my friends are coming," you say, testing the waters. "Oh yeah? No one at my school's really Jewish." "Did you tell them it's a big deal?" Sort of. "Was it hard for you to make friends when you came to Canada?" "I thought you'd have an easier time than me. Last summer you were so pretty. I don't get it. They're going to take like a trillion photos of you tonight. Wouldn't you feel better if you'd gone on a diet?" "I guess so," you mumble. "I've got this great diet I could have sent you. You only eat cabbage soup, but you can eat as much as you want, and you lose 10 pounds just like that." "Awesome," you say weakly. "Yeah," she says. Tomorrow goes downstairs and you run to the toilet, planning to couch. Afterwards, you'll have a bath. You'll detach the shower head and put it between your legs and let the vibrations carry you away, beyond your thoughts, until you belong to yourself again. Hurry up, Pa, you shout, striking the bathroom door with your palm. Instead of your father, David appears. "Sorry," you say, blushing. "I thought my dad was in there." His brow furrows. "Your hair looks nice." "You don't hate it?" "Do you?" I hate wearing it out. I feel like a librarian, and I wanted the fringe to be different too. When he offers to fix it, saying he trims his sister's bangs all the time, you're skeptical. I want to be a barber, he insists. In the bathroom, you wash your face with cold water and dry it carefully. Afterwards, you search your mom's dressing table and find the scissors and comb she uses to cut Pa's hair. David sits you down on the edge of your bed, drapes a towel across your shoulders, and takes the clip from your hair. He walks back and forth, examining your head from different angles. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Take a chill pill, okay? He has learning disabilities, your mom says, clucking her tongue over Auntie Sylvie's misfortune. Everywhere in the world, you're starting to realize there are people who matter and people who don't, like the gardener's son. You played with him when you were small. His name was Fortune, and he liked riding your tricycle through the garden. Now David's acting like you matter, and you've done nothing to deserve it. When he finishes, your fringe is a little better. Can I show you my dress? You ask shyly. He waits outside your room while you put it on. You step into your brand new shoes with the smallest kitten heels, and you can see the whole effect. Can you help me with this? You ask, opening the door and holding up the clasp on your new necklace. You turn around and feel his warm hands at the base of your neck. Wow, Auntie, he says when you turn back around. Do you like it? You look beautiful. Not too, what I mean is beautiful. Thank you, you whisper, staring at your feet and blinking hard. That night, you stand at the bima to recite your half-drilled portion. You open the door and point to the holy words with your right hand, the same hand you used to wipe friend Winkler's spit off your face, the one you used to comfort yourself, and whose wrist your mom anointed that evening with her expensive perfume. You open your mouth and you hear a deep, surprising voice. Your voice, Henrietta. Everyone is listening. After you sing the last note, the congregation rises to its feet. A hard rain of jelly sweets falls around you. Mazel tov, they shout, and you run to your parents. First to Pa, who folds you in his arms, and then to Mom, who kisses you and says, her voice catchy, "You were wonderful up there." You'd forgotten it was possible to feel so much joy. Thank you.
So we've come to the end of our wonderful evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you most of all to the authors who came to read tonight. That's why we're here. So let's give the authors a really, really good round of applause. And also social media feeds. Litlive will be happening again in a month, which is really exciting. Have a good night, everybody.